Switzerland's hydrogen truck pilots are often described as a success story that appeared too early. A small country with a strong logistics sector managed to deploy a fleet of heavy-duty hydrogen fuel cell trucks and operate them across demanding Alpine terrain, all while fueling them with domestically produced green hydrogen. The pictures looked like the future: supermarket deliveries in quiet cities, trailers winding through mountains, and a network of hydrogen filling stations built for long-haul trucking rather than laboratory demonstrations. But the real lesson from Switzerland is not about technology triumph or failure. It is about how system complexity and commercial uptime quietly decide bankability, and how utilization becomes the invisible metric that either brings capital in or scares it away. On paper, the Swiss pilots solved the most obvious barrier first: vehicle reliability. The fuel cell trucks themselves were not fragile prototypes. They accumulated millions of kilometers in ordinary logistics conditions. That matters because the first wave of hydrogen mobility often lives or dies on whether the vehicles can survive daily punishment. Unpredictable loading, brisk acceleration, cold starts, mountain grades, and hours of continuous operation. Switzerland demonstrated that fuel cell-heavy vehicles can do all of these things. The fuel cells did not melt down, and the electric drivetrains did not collapse under the demands of real logistics. In the language of early technology readiness, that alone is a milestone. But real-world adoption does not reward milestones. It rewards availability and economics. A heavy truck that is technically impressive but commercially unreliable is just another pilot. And this is where the Swiss story becomes more useful. The trucks achieved uptime, but the system around them was not always synchronized. Infrastructure had to keep pace with the fleet. Green hydrogen production had to keep pace with stations. Station throughput had to keep pace with utilization. And utilization had to keep pace with cost recovery. This choreography is fragile in the early years because any mismatch at any point in the ecosystem amplifies into higher cost per kilogram and lower confidence for future investors. The Swiss pilots revealed that the hardest problem in scaling hydrogen trucking is not whether the trucks work. It is whether the system can operate with enough uptime and enough volume over enough hours to convince a lender that the economics make sense. That introduces the concept of integrated bottlenecks. For years, hydrogen debates treated cost per kilogram as an isolated metric that would magically compress over time. Switzerland shows that cost is downstream of utilization, which is downstream of uptime, which is downstream of complexity. If the stations experience outages, fleets will hesitate. If fleets hesitate, station utilization drops. If utilization drops too far, the cost of hydrogen refuses to fall. And if cost refuses to fall, the entire category struggles to move from pilot to bankable project. None of these dynamics require catastrophe. They are slow drip forms of system failure. Switzerland's trucks did not fail dramatically. They revealed how quiet constraints decide viability. To understand why this matters, imagine explaining hydrogen trucking to a credit committee in 2026. The committee does not care about glossy videos or the elegance of fuel cells. It cares about counterparty risk, offtake certainty, station throughput, power price volatility, and demand lock-ins. It wants to know how many trucks must operate per station to recover capital and how many hours per day those stations must remain available. It wants to know who takes utilization risk if volume falls short and who absorbs the cost if hydrogen prices spike. In Switzerland, these questions shifted the spotlight away from the truck OEM and toward the balance of plant. Hydrogen production, distribution, station reliability, and fleet coordination. This is the most important insight for the next decade. Hydrogen trucking is not a vehicle business. It is a systems business. And systems businesses mature only when each component's uptime is synchronized with the others. The Swiss pilots are especially instructive because they reveal how utilization is not a simple matter of demand. Utilization depends on how many fleets adopt simultaneously, how many routes overlap, and how much redundancy exists in the fueling network. A single isolated station cannot be profitable even if the trucks love the technology. Stations need clusters of vehicles and shared corridors to raise throughput. But fleets only commit when stations already exist, and stations only get built when fleets commit. Switzerland solved this chicken and egg dilemma by bundling vehicles, hydrogen production, and station development into a coordinated ecosystem. Even then, utilization fluctuated. And because hydrogen is a capital-intensive fuel with cascading infrastructure layers, fluctuations matter. Every dip in utilization lengthens the payback period and pushes bankability further into the future. This is where uptime enters the story. Uptime determines whether fleet managers trust hydrogen for critical routes. If a station is down, even temporarily, trucks must detour, idle, or switch fuels. Traditional diesel logistics have decades of redundancy designed in. Stations are everywhere. Refills are fast, and cost differences across stations are small. Hydrogen does not yet have that redundancy. A brief outage in a small network can cause cascading operational disruptions. For a truck, uptime is binary. Either it fuels and works, or it becomes expensive dead weight. Fleet managers learn quickly which routes feel safe and which do not, and they adjust accordingly. If they pull back from certain stations, utilization falls, and the station economics weaken. Switzerland demonstrated that this is not theoretical. Stations must be up long enough, with enough guaranteed throughput to keep fleets comfortable. This creates the central bankability riddle revealed by Switzerland. Hydrogen trucking does not scale on technical feasibility, it scales on synchronized uptime. To make hydrogen competitive with diesel, you need cost discipline. To get cost discipline, you need scale. To get scale, you need utilization. To get utilization, you need fleets. And to get fleets, you need uptime. That chain has no shortcuts. It is the logic of industrialization. Switzerland completed the first half of the journey: vehicle reliability, ecosystem coordination, and operational proof of concept. But the second half, bankability, cost compression, and corridor replication, depends on more than engineering. It depends on choreography. This is why Switzerland's story plays so differently in 2030 and 2035 futures. In a 2030 scenario, hydrogen trucking competes for strategic corridors and long-haul lanes where batteries struggle due to terrain, charging infrastructure, or power constraints. Hydrogen only needs to win a few categories: heavy load, long duty cycle, cold climates, and limited depot electrification. In that world, Switzerland becomes a template. Pilots show that the trucks work, that fleets will adopt, and that stations can operate with green hydrogen. But in a 2035 scenario, the question becomes whether the cost of hydrogen has declined fast enough, and whether station networks have achieved enough uptime and utilization to look credible to institutional capital. A future with a few dozen trucks and a handful of stations is not a failure. It is simply not bankable at scale. This is precisely why we emphasize modeling and scenario testing a inside H2 hub by Renewable Energy. Pilots like Switzerland are invaluable, not because they prove a market exists, but because they reveal the parameters you must stress test before you pitch a hydrogen trucking corridor. You must model utilization bands. What happens at 7 trucks per station, 10 trucks per station, or 12 trucks per station? You must model price volatility. What happens if electricity prices spike for 6 months, or hydrogen production pauses temporarily? And you must align time horizons. Fleet contracts are often around 3 to 6 years, while hydrogen infrastructure amortizes over 10 to 15. Those mismatches can kill projects quietly. H2 Hub is designed to help developers, consultants, and investors quantify these moving parts so that decisions are grounded in data rather than optimism. If Switzerland teaches anything, it is that optimism is not a financing strategy. There is another subtle but important dimension to the Swiss pilots: geography. Switzerland is small, mountainous, and economically dense. That makes it ideal for hydrogen pilots because logistics routes are predictable and distances manageable. But it also means the pilots are shielded from some of the brutal realities of continental trucking markets. Scaling from Swiss corridors to broader European corridors introduces regulatory complexity, cross-border coordination, electricity pricing disparities, and hydrogen supply heterogeneity. A lender evaluating a hydrogen trucking corridor from Rotterdam to Stuttgart will ask how the weakest segment behaves under stress. A long corridor is only as bankable as its worst node. Switzerland protected its pilots from that worst node problem by keeping them domestic. That was smart for testing, but it means the scaling challenge remains ahead. All of this raises the final question investors care about. What is the path from pilots to bankability? Switzerland suggests that the path runs through 3 bridges. The first bridge is demand clustering. You need fleets that operate on overlapping routes and commit simultaneously. This converts early infrastructure into a shared asset rather than a stranded one. The second bridge is cost harmonization. Hydrogen cannot simply be green. It must be predictable. If hydrogen pricing swings wildly, fleet managers cannot plan, and lenders cannot underwrite. The third bridge is redundancy. A hydrogen network that works only when everything goes right is not a network. It is a science fair. Bankable systems must work when components fail, when markets fluctuate, and when logistics schedules slip. Put differently, bankability is about resilience under stress. Switzerland proved resilience at the vehicle level, partial resilience at the infrastructure level, and variable resilience at the market level. For hydrogen advocates, that should be encouraging rather than discouraging. Most clean technologies never get this far. The Switzerland pilots did not collapse. They ran, they delivered goods, they built stations, they produced green hydrogen, they attracted media attention, industry interest, and policy discussions. But they also exposed fragility. And fragility is what the next wave of projects must address directly rather than hiding behind uncritical optimism. For hydrogen trucking, complexity is not a bug. It is the reality of industrial transition. Diesel has a century of solved problems behind it. Hydrogen has 3 years of Swiss pilot data. That gap will not close overnight, but it closes faster when stakeholders treat pilots as diagnostic tools rather than marketing showcases. Switzerland's greatest contribution is not that it made hydrogen trucking look effortless. It is that it made the difficulty visible. Visibility is the precursor to capital, because capital funds what it understands and discounts what it cannot quantify. As the hydrogen industry moves into the late 2020s and early 2030s, more pilots will hit the same wall Switzerland hit. Not the wall of failure, but the wall of bankability. The question will not be, does the truck work? The question will be, can this corridor support 50, 100, or 300 trucks at a price and uptime profile that justifies infrastructure investment? Switzerland hints at 2 answers. If fleets cluster, if hydrogen price stabilizes, and if stations maintain high uptime, corridors grow. If they do not, pilots remain pilots. Either scenario teaches something important, and neither diminishes the significance of what Switzerland achieved. To close this analysis, it is worth reframing Switzerland not as an outlier, but as a preview. Every country hoping to deploy hydrogen trucking at scale will have to navigate the same choreography of uptime, utilization, and cost. Every project developer will have to confront the same mismatch between electricity markets and hydrogen economics. Every investor will eventually ask the same uncomfortable questions about offtake certainty and utilization risk. Switzerland simply asked those questions first, in public, with real trucks and real hydrogen. The industry should pay attention, because pilot data is more valuable than pilot hype. For developers and investors who want to move beyond narrative and quantify these dynamics for their own projects, H2 Hub by Renee Energy is built for exactly that purpose. It allows you to model hydrogen trucking systems as financial and technical ecosystems rather than as singular assets, and to explore the sensitivity of bankability to utilization, uptime, power pricing, and offtake structure. Case studies like Switzerland become inputs rather than anecdotes, and the hard questions become tractable. If hydrogen trucking is going to scale, the industry needs tools that turn lessons into design variables, and H2 Hub is our contribution to that transition. And for those looking for complementary resources on the financial side, the affiliate project finance models we include in the description, covering hydrogen electrolysis, Renewable electricity, green ammonia, geothermal, biogas, pumped hydro storage, and solar PV provide practical templates for building the cost and cash flow logic that underpins industrial clean tech deployments. Switzerland proved that hydrogen trucking can operate in the real world. The work ahead lies in proving that it can finance itself in it.